For more on the call between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, I'm joined now by Israeli government spokesperson Avi Hyman. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me on, Jim.
So you're aware the White House demand is for specific, concrete, and measurable steps to address civilian harm, humanitarian suffering, and the safety of aid workers. Will Israel heed that demand and release such steps?
Jim, and to my mind, Israel is already doing those things and improves those things every single day. According to the head of the Urban Warfare Studies program at West Point, Israel is doing more than any army has done in the history of modern warfare.
Sorry,
to secure
a spokesperson for the IDF repeated that same single person yesterday. The U.S. president is saying this strike was unacceptable, is now demanding concrete steps. I'm asking, will Israel take concrete steps, or are you saying you're already doing enough today?
Oh, sorry, then I misunderstood your question. If we're talking specifically about the accident that happened yesterday, definitely that is under investigation. The Prime Minister said it was a mistake. The head of the IDF apologized for it openly, and that is being investigated, and we will do our utmost to ensure that nothing like that happens in the future. That was a mistake. I mean, the British Army makes mistakes. The American Army has made mistakes, and they investigate them.
Okay, and, I want to get to the investigation in a moment because there's a question about the timeline of that. I'm asking specifically, the U.S. president, in a call to the Israeli prime minister, the office you represent, is demanding specific, concrete, measurable steps to address what he says is an unacceptable threat to civilians and aid workers. Will the Israeli government take such steps?
Well, this is an unfolding story. The president has made his statements in a closed conversation with the prime minister. The prime minister is currently in a cabinet meeting with his cabinet, and I'm sure he will respond accordingly in due time. But what I can tell you is that what hasn't changed clearly from what the president said, what hasn't changed clearly is that the American administration are committed to our war aims, to destroy Hamas, to bring home the 134 hostages, men, women, children, babies held against their will, a crime against humanity, and to ensure that Gaza doesn't pose a threat to us. So we will continue along those lines. As far as talk of a ceasefire is concerned, the Americans have been pretty clear from day one that a ceasefire without the hostages would not be acceptable. We've said that it wouldn't be acceptable, and that was the American position from day one alongside with us. Because if we were to give Hamas a ceasefire, they would rearm, they would reposition, and they would do what they want to do.
But the U.S. president is demanding a ceasefire now. Are you saying that the Israeli government is going to ignore that demand?
Well, I'm saying I don't want to speculate before the prime minister comes out of the cabinet meeting and makes his statements having been on that phone call. I wasn't on that phone call. So I would say that we'll have to wait and see how that happens.
Help me clear up something then. An Israeli government spokesman said that the investigation into the strike on these World Central Kitchen workers will be available in the coming weeks. Yesterday, spokesman for the IDF, Lieutenant Colonel Lerner, told me it will take days. I want to play that comment and see if you can clear up which is true. Have a listen.
Our Chief of Staff, the IDF Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Herzi Halevi, said very clearly that it was a mistake, a misidentification, and that we need to investigate what transpired. The reality is one where the investigations are underway. We expect their conclusions in the next couple of days.
Conclusions in the next couple of days or weeks? Which is it?
Well, I'm not sure what the other soundbite was because you didn't play it. But
I'm quoting a spokesperson for the Israeli government who said the direct quote is results of investigations in the coming weeks.
Right, so I can only conclude that one was said before the other when the latter wasn't clear. But if
what's the answer? Perhaps you speak for the government. Is it days or weeks?
No, I'm saying if Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner said that it would be a number of days, it'll be a number of days.
Okay. I want to ask you about confidence here because I've spoken to aid workers and you've seen the public statements and you've seen the suspension of aid work in Gaza following this attack on the World Central Kitchen convoy. Many of them saying they just don't trust IDF statements of safe passage. And just in the last 24 hours, at least 4 Palestinian civilians were killed, including a paramedic. This after Israeli artillery fire targeted an area near a school sheltering displaced civilians. The father of a pregnant woman in Rafah says that the pregnant woman and 2 children were killed in an airstrike in Rafah just in the last 24 hours. So as we see events like this, why should aid groups and why should people following this war closely believe that Israel is taking this pressure from the U.S. seriously as strikes that kill civilians continue?
With all due respect, we don't need pressure to avoid civilian casualties. It's what we do every day. It's part of our very ethos. It's part of our very DNA. And that's why when the real numbers are assessed, you will see that Israel has gone out of its way to avoid civilian casualties. In fact, as my prime minister said, when you look at the ratio between combatants versus accidental civilian casualties, you'll see that Israel is, according to the prime minister, less than a 1-to-1 ratio. Now,
13,000 children? You consider that an acceptable ratio?
No. These are Hamas figures.
They're not Hamas figures. U.S. intelligence assessments are quite similar to those figures. And by the way, I'm just quoting you examples of where CNN spoke to the father of a pregnant woman. So I'm not calling up Hamas to get that instance. We do our own reporting on the ground as well. I'm just asking you if you consider that an acceptable loss of human life.
No civilian casualty on either side, and I speak as someone who is close to the conflict, who has lost people in this conflict, no civilian casualty is acceptable. We don't seek any civilian casualties, but in every single war since the creation of man, there have been civilian casualties in war. It is unavoidable, but we will do our utmost to avoid it. And we have. Our track record speaks for itself. It is better than any other army in the world. And that's not me speaking. That's experts, the military experts around the world.
You're citing the same expert the IDF cited to me yesterday. I'm quoting the U.S. president. But listen, you're welcome back on the program as the results of this investigation come back. Avi Hyman, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
Joining me now to discuss